Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise today in support of the Criminal Law, Child Exploitation and Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill of 2012. This government has made a commitment to Queensland families and children. We want Queensland to be the safest place in Australia to raise a child. This bill increases maximum penalties for child exploitation offences and affords further protection for Queensland children. I'm proud to be part of a government that continues to recognise the importance of protecting our children's innocence. We've already introduced tougher penalties for sexual offenders and established the Carmody inquiry into the Queensland Child Protection System. This bill introduces new maximum penalties for child exploitation offences, including further protection for vulnerable children with an impairment of the mind. The legislation also introduces a new offence of grooming a child, placing significance on the intervention and charging of offenders before a sexual act or offence can occur. This bill also removes the distinction in penalties between possessing and making child exploitation material, increasing all maximum penalties to 14 years imprisonment. This is an important part of the legislation, recognising the influence that market demand has on the production of child exploitation material. As the internet has allowed predators and offenders to access child exploitation material with increasing ease, it becomes crucial that the legislation reflects the social link between child pornography and child sexual offences. What this bill acknowledges is the clear links between the viewing of pornography and sexual offending against children. Braveheart's Research and Policy Development Manager Carol Ronkin has been gathering years of evidence on this subject and has taken on an important advocacy role in the child protection space. According to Carol and fellow researcher McCarthy, pornography influences sexual offending against children in a number of ways. It sexually arouses the offender. The role of sexual fantasies is important. The offending cycle illustrates the place of sexual fantasies about children in sexual offending. No offender molests or grooms a child without some level of inappropriate sexual fantasy having preceded their offending. Not all those who sexually fantasise about children actually go on to offend, but many, especially over time, find that this unfortunate habit increases the likelihood. The viewing of inappropriate material also may be used by offenders to groom potential victims by apparently normalising sexual contact or conversations between adults and children. Offenders can often gauge the likelihood of their success by the child's reaction to exposure to inappropriate material. The use of inappropriate material, as referred to, may also often be used by offenders to blackmail children by threatening them to against informing their parents or others about their viewing of pornography. Offenders may often take photographs of victims and post or trade these on the internet. Offenders often view and in some cases digitally manipulate adult pornographic images or otherwise normal pictures of children to create sexually explicit images of children. While there is no proven causal link between the viewing of pornography and sexual offending, there is evidence to suggest that viewing pornography negatively impacts upon the attitudes of the viewer. Viewing child pornography reduces the inhibitions of child sex offenders by normalising sexual activity with children and by feeding the cognitive distortions about the children's sexuality, such as "she started it, he wanted it, she came on to me." Clearly, the links between child pornography and offences against children are clear. They are abhorrent and highlight just why this legislation and the tougher penalties proposed are so important in dealing with and acknowledging the heinous nature of the offences against our children and young people. Also in the research notes provided to me by Carol from Bravehearts, the issue of sexualisation of children is examined. The context for children and young people's exposure to pornography includes a highly sexualised cultural environment. The frequency and explicitness of sexual content in mainstream media has increased steadily. More widely, there has been a pornographication of popular culture. In tandem with these trends, shifting information and communication technologies have allowed for new forms of pornography production and exchange. A porn aesthetic pervades culture in fashion, music, entertainment and behaviour. This is evident in billboards, music videos and designer stores that shape the desires and imaginations of a younger and younger demographic. And it is not just that culture has become more sexualised, it is the imagery of the pornographic erotic which has shaped the sexualisation of culture. There are certain porn insignia now that are more and more commonplace within mainstream culture, like the use of porn labels and messages on clothing. The pervasiveness of this porn signature throughout popular culture provides a kind of legitimacy to porn itself. If you grow up seeing Playboy bunnies on T-shirts, pencil cases and car windows, then these symbols are likely to seem familiar and inoffensive. This is very effective branding for both the particular companies concerned and for the pornography industry more generally. Another example of the exploitation and normalisation of inappropriate attitudes of sex and sexual behaviours is the ongoing series of sexpo conventions becoming more and more popular in Australian culture. Well-known researcher Melinda Tankard-Rice has investigated the effects of the three-day festival. She notes, according to its website, this show will increase your attractiveness and sexual drive. It contains beautiful women, hunky men, nudity and crankin' entertainment. In her words, call me fussy, say I'm hard to please, but if what I witnessed is supposed to promote a healthy, happy sex life, then I think I just saw the death of sex. Tankard-Rice sums up Sexpo and all forms of pornography as a celebration of and vandalism of the human body and the objectification and subordination of women. In the end, Sexpo is anti-intimacy, anti-connection, anti-warmth. It just leaves you feeling cold. And so, Mr Deputy Speaker, in this society where we're seeing more and more boundaries lifted, where we're seeing more and more inappropriate behaviours legitimised by a society that in many respects has lost its way, it's important that we stand up in this House and that we support this legislation to ensure that there are tougher penalties and tougher laws and a higher regard for the protection of our children. Recently, I had the privilege of meeting with some of my colleagues at Logan City Council with Mayor Pam Parker, and if I recall correctly, I think the member for Logan was there, Michael Ladder was there, the member for Springwood was there. I'm trying to remember who the others were there with me. And Freya was there with us, and we were there to talk about the need for greater education in our community. And Hetty Johnson, who's been a long-standing friend and a great advocate in Australia for our children, highlighted the need to start educating, empowering and protecting our children. And on this occasion she presented us with a particular curriculum, and while that's a great thing, I think it's such a sad reflection on where our society's come to, that we now have to run education programs to protect the innocence of our children, that we now need to introduce laws in the name of decency simply to look after our children and ensure that every child has the opportunity to grow up with a degree of innocence. It saddens me also that the federal government recently has had to announce a Royal Commission looking into the issue of institutional abuse. And while I wholeheartedly support the need for such a commission, it saddens me that this commission will fundamentally look at about 5 to 10% of the problem. Because, Mr Deputy Speaker, most abuse in Australia actually occurs in the home, in a neighbourhood, in a club of some kind. In fact, about 92% of abuse will actually happen anywhere but in an institution. And so the challenges before us are great. I note also that this legislation looks at new penalties in regard of drug offences. I note that it also makes some important amendments in relation to our blue card system designed to provide greater protection for our children. And it's so, as the former Assistant Minister for Child Safety and former President of Bravehearts and now the member for Southport, I'm very proud to stand today and speak in support of this bill, and I commend this bill to the House.